Human Rights Writers Association of Nigeria asked President Buhari to sack DSS Director General Yusuf Bichi immediately. World Bank predicts economic recession in the country. On the international scene, 5 killed in New Zealand volcanic eruption. And in sports, Nigeria qualifies for 2020 Ultra Runners Championship.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. The Federal Inland Revenue Service has a new boss as President Muhammadu Buhari has approved the composition of a new board. Approval of the new nominee chairman, Muhammad Nami, is subject to Senate confirmation. Nami is said to be a renowned tax consultant. The board is composed of a member representing each of the 6 geographical zones and statutory representatives from a select number of ministries and government agencies. The new nominee has served and is still serving on many companies' board and statutory board audit committees. President Buhari appointed Nami as a member of the Presidential Committee on Audit of Recovered Stolen Assets in 2017. He is married with children. A statement by the President's media advisor says current FIRS Chairman Babatunde Fala's term of office expired on Monday and is expected to hand over to the most senior director on the board, who will take charge pending the Senate's confirmation of the new board. The Human Rights Writers Association of Nigeria has called on President Muhammadu Buhari to immediately dismiss the Director General of the Department of State Services, DSS, Yusuf Bichi. This is in reaction to a statement by a DSS spokesperson justifying the agency's rearrest of Revolution Now convener Omoyele Sowore in a federal high court in Abuja on Friday. A statement on Monday by the association describes the DSS move as, quote, abominable defecation of the Temple of Justice. It further says the invasion of the federal high court, just like the agency did at the National Assembly and residences of justices of the nation's Supreme Court, shows the administration's desire to institute what it calls arbitrariness and anarchy, and to elevate impunity and official lawlessness to a state policy. The association says this will lead to a collapse of constitutional democracy and the emergence of a full-blown dictatorship. Huriwa says there is no justifiable reason for the DSS, which was created by statute, to invade a federal high court and apply brute force in rearresting 2 Nigerian citizens who are already on bail granted to them by the competent court of law. The DSS has claimed in a statement by spokesman Peter Afunaya that Sowore acted a well-rehearsed script to give the world the impression that agents of the secret police arrested him inside a courtroom. The All Progressives Congress APC has rebuked the People's Democratic Party PDP and its presidential candidate Atiku Abubakar on Sunday for condemning the Buhari government and the Department of State Services over last Friday's court invasion in which Omoyele Sowore was rearrested. The situation has generated local and international criticism. 2 U.S. senators have condemned the act and have threatened the country with severed relations if Sowore is not released. In a statement Sunday night, APC National Publicity Secretary Larry Isaonilu said in a statement that Atiku and the PDP are spreading concocted alternative facts and lies on the incident. It said the presidency has made it clear that the DSS does not need the president's permission in all cases to carry out its essential and constitutional responsibilities. The party says it will continue to reiterate the need for Nigerians to be wary of those who are bent on bringing our country down. The statement says APC totally rejects what it calls, quote, inciting messages and criminal antics of some individuals and partisans who have embarked on a campaign of calumny against this administration and are calling for a forceful takeover of government, end quote. APC calls them cowards and enemies of Nigeria. The party accused Sowore of leaving the country after losing the last election to hold talks with someone else it calls a wanted secessionist. APC says it has pictures to prove it. A new World Bank economic report predicts Nigeria may be heading towards another economic recession. This is due to the volatile global oil market and dwindling price of crude oil. And this comes just 3 years after the country edged out of its worst economic meltdown in nearly 3 decades. Kelechi Mikalam tells us how this would impact the nation.
Worrying predictions coming from the World Bank. Nigeria may be on the brink of yet another recession as oil prices fluctuate between $63 and $55 per barrel. The World Bank, in its 2019 economic report, has said if crude oil prices plunge by as much as 25% to $50 per barrel, it would significantly reduce economic growth and lead to another recession. Just 3 years back, Nigeria was hit by its worst recession in nearly 3 decades, with about 50% of its 200 million population living below poverty line. Another recession would have a devastating impact on the country and its people.
Another recession will mean that poverty rate that is already high. That same report said Nigeria will house 25% of global poor people in no time. It will mean that more poverty. It will mean that a lot of things Nigeria wants in terms of GDP that Nigeria will not be able to do. It will mean more unemployment. It's not really going to spell out. We cannot put our heads around it. You saw what happened to Naira to global currencies, particularly Naira to dollar, which was as high as over 500. It's a major thing we need to guide against.
Crude oil is Nigeria's mainstay, accounting for about 90% of export earnings and over 60% of government revenue. Government has made diversification efforts from its oil-dependent economy, vying into sectors like agriculture, services and mining. Experts advise on major reforms to avoid another economic downturn.
What we need to do is reform. If we want to go on reform in manufacturing, we should go on reform on that. Power supply, it should be a major reform. If we're borrowing money, it should go directly into infrastructure. And one of the way the world can see that we are serious about this, every single kobo generated from crude oil should be invested directly in infrastructure. Capital expenditure, not administrative capital expenditure.
Nigeria's growth has remained relatively slow since edging out of recession. The non-oil sector still lags behind, with 1.6% and 2.6% growth in the first and second quarter of 2019, respectively. Aside looking to other sectors, there have been cutbacks on government spendings and actions to increase its tax base, although not enough. Now authorities would be looking towards focusing on policies that would avert a looming recession.
Coming up, African news. 4 gold miners are dead in South Africa trapped after a rockfall in a mine. And later, international news. 5 killed in New Zealand volcanic eruption.
You are watching ANN.
I better go. I feel like saying the friend don't take time finish. Push!
When they're supposed to buy food, they will not buy. Be looking. He still has 200 naira for it. He will still buy.
Oh, got to 200. Make I put your usual bill.
Yes, but you go add 888. Join now.
It's a big level.
Is it not 200 you give that lady?
Now 888 is that.
888 now the new AWOOF. Recharge with star 888 star pin hash to enjoy 5 times AWOOF from MTN to call any network. You fit also enjoy am on top VTU. Just ask your vendor for AWOOF for you.
Conductor, where my naira change?
Office man, you know they forget money sef.
Oh, forget. You go even add 888 join that shit. Give my change.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Now to stories from across the continent. We start in Kenya, where the death toll from a collapsed residential building has now risen to 10. At least 36 people have been rescued. The Kenyan Red Cross says it believes 23 remain unaccounted for. The cause of the collapse remains unknown. Reporter Robert Dagila has more from Nairobi.
More than 30 hours after a residential building collapsed in Nairobi, rescuers are yet to reach the ground floor of the 6-story apartment block as the death toll climbed overnight.
We have lost 5. We have been able to identify 4. And we cannot for now give out the names because we have not contacted their loved ones.
At least 36 people have been rescued and taken to hospital. 19 people were treated and discharged. Located about 100 meters from the disaster site, relatives and friends of the missing have been gathering at the tracing desk to provide information that may assist rescuers.
We'll take in their details and get as much biodata as possible about what kind of clothes these people are wearing, what their ages are, the sizes, so that as the rescue team is going on, then they know what to look for.
Among those missing are the niece and nephew of Boz Mukulu.
The missing are a son to my brother and a daughter to my brother. And the son is called Lenson Litiema, and the daughter is called Sharon Mkuna.
The family is still clinging to hope the 2 teenagers will be found alive.
We have been waiting, and we still have a hope that they will come out safely and alive.
With each passing hour, hope of finding more people alive diminishes. But the fact that they're not using heavy equipment much is an indication that rescuers are still of the belief that more survivors could still be found in the rubble.
4 gold miners have been found dead, trapped underground after a tremor caused the rockfall in northeast South Africa. The National Union of Mine Workers said a 5th miner was rescued with serious injuries on Friday after the accident on the Tau Lekwa mine in the town of Orkney. NUM President Joseph Mensesese said the last person to whom officials spoke said, quote, "We're suffocating, please bring us some oxygen," end quote. That the accidents involving miners are common in South Africa, which has the deepest mines in the world. The Department of Mineral Resources said more than 80 persons died last year in the country's mines. The United Nations World Food Programme is in a race against time to find an additional $200 million required to scale up its response to Zimbabwe's food insecurity emergency. The situation in Zimbabwe is expected to spike during the lean season between January and April 2020. Reporter Faraya Ngwakutuya has the details.
Initially, the World Food Programme had planned to provide aid to 2.7 million people, but a recent review indicates the food security situation has deteriorated and that number will shoot up to 4.1 million. The plight of the vulnerable communities has been made worse by the economic situation that has seen shortages of a number of commodities and, crucially, cash.
As I speak to you, we have a backlog of assistance in some districts. I give you one. Gokwe North. Since August, we've not been able to provide Gokwe North with the cash assistance. As of January, we've made the conscious decision that all the 3.9 million people in the rural areas would be assisted with in-kind food basket.
200 metric tons of maize will need to be imported. But that presents a whole new set of logistical challenges that will be difficult to get around, given that the response to Zimbabwe's emergency appeal is currently inadequate.
We used to get most of our grains from Zambia. There is an export ban. Even Zambia is also feeling the pinch of the drought. So it's the minimal quantity that is available in South Africa, and now we are looking at international purchase. We are running against time because we need to have these commodities in country by January to implement this program at scale, reaching 4.1 million people from January up to April, and then 1.5 May and June. It would cost us a total of $293 million. We've only received 30% of that, meaning that we have a funding gap of $211 million.
The situation is likely to remain precarious next year, as projections are that the country will suffer another poor rainfall season, meaning food aid distribution is likely to continue beyond June.
When we return, international news. 5 killed in New Zealand volcanic eruption. And later, sports. Nigeria qualifies for 2020 Ultra Runners Championship.
Welcome back. This is CNN News. On the foreign scene, Britain is exactly 3 days away from a general election which could seal the fate of Brexit and the United Kingdom. Johnson called the early election in a bid to resolve the crisis that has dogged the Brexit plan since the referendum in 2016. 4 opinion polls published on Saturday put the Conservative Party ahead of Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party by between 8 and 15 points. Johnson's lead has narrowed in recent weeks. Similar polls largely failed to predict the 2016 referendum result. They also could not show that Theresa May would lose her majority in the 2017 snap election. One of the key issues in this election is the future of the National Health Service. Corbyn has accused Johnson of offering up the NHS for sale as part of a future trade agreement with the US once the UK leaves the EU. The U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigations has identified 21-year-old Second Lieutenant Mohammed Saeed Abshamari as the Saudi Arabian aviation student who opened fire, killing 3 persons and wounding 8 at the United States Navy base in Pensacola, Florida, last week before being fatally shot by police. The motive for the rampage is not yet determined, and other Saudi students at the base who were close to the attacker are cooperating with investigators. Bachar Royas, special agents in charge of the FBI's Jackson office and lead investigator on the case, confirmed 80 FBI special agents, 100 support staff, and scores of other investigators from the Navy and multiple federal agencies are working on the case. Royas says the attacker used a Glock Model 45 9mm handgun that he had purchased illegally in Florida. 5 persons were killed in New Zealand on Monday when a volcano erupted in New Zealand. Many were injured and several persons are missing. Tourists were seen walking inside the crater of White Island volcano moments before Monday's eruption. White Island, also called Wakari, is the country's most active volcano. The privately owned island is a tourist destination with frequent day tours and scenic flights. 23 persons have been rescued, but it is unclear how many remained on the island. Police also confirmed fewer than 50 persons were on the island when the volcano erupted. Rescuers are not able to reach the island for fear of further eruptions. Radio New Zealand reports some of those injured are in critical condition. Dairy farming accounts for around 6% of Australia's agricultural production and generates $3 billion of agricultural export revenue. But the Department of Agriculture and Water Resources says this year's prolonged drought has adversely affected earnings. Greg Navarro reports.
For Graham Forbes, checking on the level of the area's only running river.
Normally they'd be up around that 3 mark there on the there.
Become a depressing task.
It would be down and only running about 20% of its normal flow.
The Barrington River serves hundreds of dairy farms in this part of rural New South Wales. But increasingly, the Barrington is not able to handle the job as it and the land around it continues to fall victim to a vicious drought.
We've had to reduce stock numbers dramatically so far this year. I think we've sold over 600 head. We've been able to maintain production up until now, but our irrigation supply has virtually been cut off now, and we'll be forced to go on to all purchase feeds, and that's carting hay up to 1,500 kilometres from South Australia. So we can do it for a little while, but it's not sustainable.
Some farmers haven't had irrigation for almost a year, now forced to cart water in along with increasingly expensive feed. Any chance of profits have long dried up with the land.
If this drought persists through this summer, we could lose half the dairy farms in this region.
The river here is also the only water source for the town of Gloucester's 2,500 residents. If this stops flowing, the town has 2, maybe 3 days tops before it completely runs out of water.
Thank you. At Gloucester Rural Supplies, workers here know better than most just how much the drought has impacted everyone.
We do find that customers tend to lean on us a little bit and tell us how they're really feeling, because at the end of the day they've only got their animals to talk to. So, and it's actually starting to just have an effect on our staff now, because it's just day in, day out, repetitive downside on what they're trying to achieve in life.
Many towns are now forced to plan for scenarios that just a few years ago seemed unthinkable.
It's difficult, but you just need to be as positive as you can be to try and help these people through it.
And hope for the kind of rains that will bring back rivers and profits.
Still to come, sports. Nigeria qualifies for 2020 Ultra Runners Championship. Please stay with us.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. In sport, South African, Nigeria and Zimbabwe teams have qualified for the 2020 World Ultra Runners Championship at the Value Jet Remo 50 kilometers ultra race held in Shagamu and Kenya. Zimbabwe finished as the overall third place. South Africans were top in the women's team event. The third position was not decided as majority of the athletes didn't complete the course. The team winners and individual winners respectively got $2,000, $1,500 and $1,000 for their effort. Interestingly, this is the first time monetary prizes will be given in the 35-year history of the event. The World Anti-Doping Agency has imposed a 4-year ban on Russia from all major sporting events. It means the Russian flag and anthem would not be allowed at events such as the Tokyo 2020 Olympics and Paralympics and football's 2022 World Cup in Qatar. But athletes who can prove they are untainted by the doping scandal will be able to compete under a neutral flag. This ban comes after Russia's anti-doping agency was declared non-compliant for manipulating laboratory data handed over to investigators back in January. WADA says WADA has 21 days to appeal against the ban. If it does so, the appeal will be referred to the Court of Arbitration for Sports.